Hello. Welcome to the In Love with Business podcast. This miniseries is titled Chief Sustainability Heroes and is hosted by Professor Paolo Melina and Melina Shore from University College London, School of Management. Throughout this series, we will talk to sustainability leaders from different organizations and sectors to learn about their sustainability journeys. We will ask them about their career paths, the challenges they encountered in implementing complex strategies of sustainable transformation, and what inspired them along the way. We will also ask what advice they would offer to aspiring chief sustainability officers. Enjoy the episode.
In today's episode, we are joined by Carrie Harris, Director of Sustainability at British Airways. British Airways has been flying its customers around the globe for more than 100 years. And together with its affiliates, today the airline travels more than into 200 destinations across 75 countries globally. Carrie joined the BA as Head of Sustainability in 2020, and she was appointed the Director of Sustainability in 2022. Since joining the company, Carrie has established their sustainability agenda, what they call the BA Better World. We are going to learn about this in a second. And before joining BA, Carrie was with the parent company, International Airlines Group, where she was basically Group Sustainability Manager for 5 years. Carrie, is really a pleasure to have you in our show. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Paolo. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Carrie, can you tell us more about your background and your path to becoming a Director of Sustainability at BA?
Yeah, sure. So I studied environmental science at university, which in itself actually was an accident because I thought I wanted to be a journalist, and I went to university to study English and psychology with a view to becoming a journalist. After about 2 months, I realised I wasn't doing very well at reading a Shakespeare play per day. And I bumped into my old geography teacher who said to me, why don't you look at geography and environment? You were really good at that. So I transferred course. I ended up studying environmental science and biology. And really, that led to 2 pivotal lectures that happened in the 4th year of my first master's degree, which one was about climate science and the evidence for climate change. And we're talking here about the early 90s.
Yeah.
And the other one was about new regulations on environmental impact assessment. And it was a light bulb moment for me that I was like, wow, we need to change the course that we're on. And here's some regulation that can help drive that change. Mm-hmm. And that really made me then think there actually could be some career path here. At the time, sustainability was not the function. It didn't even really exist. I think, in fact, one of my degree questions was about defining sustainability. So it was very early days, but really, so I feel very privileged to have found a pathway in what was at that time quite a nascent industry. And I have basically more or less always worked in aviation sustainability. I had a couple of years where I was doing general consulting straight after university. I did a master's degree in environmental impact assessment and environmental management. And then I went into business consulting in East London. I worked there for a couple of years. And then I came to the London Borough of Hounslow, where I started working on the Terminal 5 inquiry from an environmental perspective. And then I moved into aviation, working for Heathrow Airport, then NATS Air Traffic Control, and then, as you mentioned in the introduction there, International Airlines Group, and ultimately into British Airways. So I found this real passion in aviation that I'd grown up with, loving travel, loving the opportunity that travel brings, loving the technology that's within aviation. And I found an opportunity to bring that together with my environmental values and try and find a solution. So that's kind of how I got to here. Yeah.
It's great.
Fantastic. And of course, aviation is a very, important sector in the context of sustainability and decarbonization. Can you tell us more about the BA Better World program?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, as you said, for aviation, sustainability is a big challenge, partly because we're kind of, at the moment, 98% reliant on fossil fuels for our operations. But also more broadly for sustainability in terms of the environmental impact that we have, but also the social positives as well as the social impacts that we can have with tourism and the value that we bring to society. So it really covers the full ESG remit. BA Better World in itself does exactly that. So it's people, planet, and responsible business is the scope of the programme. And the strapline that we use is our most important journey yet. And I think that's really profound because when we set that vision, we set that as part of integrating sustainability into our core business strategy.
Yeah.
And we know
something that we are all very passionate about,
yes.
by the way.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think also that line recognizes the fact that this is, excuse the pun, this is a long haul challenge for us. It's going to take decades really to get to the goals that we want. But we know it's profound for the future of our business. And that's why we refer to it as our most important journey yet. It's profound for the planet, but it's profound for the future of our industry. So, so the BA Better World, People, Planet, Responsible Business, and that's kind of the team that I look after now, covers those elements. So in terms of people engagement, building awareness on sustainability, looking after colleague well-being. On the planet side, it's obviously the climate aspect, as well as waste, environmental compliance and reporting. And then on the responsible business side, that covers our community investment programme, as well as our customer engagement and customer accessibility. So it's quite a broad scope, but we have an incredible team full of very passionate and skilled people. So yeah, it's a great team to work in.
Great.
Fantastic.
And Carrie, you mentioned there, so obviously sustainability is broad in scope. And through this podcast and the research that Paolo and I do together, when we ask people what is sustainability, or how do you define the role of director of sustainability, you sometimes get many different answers. So we're curious what your thoughts are. Like, how would you describe the role of director of sustainability, given how multifaceted it is?
You're right. It's multifaceted. It's almost like there's many contradictions, I think, in this, because it's, at one moment it's highly strategic, forward-looking, but it also has to be tactical and responsive to day-to-day elements. It's, driving a central team, but you have to have influence across the company. Thinking about these parallels, it's internal facing as well as external facing, short term as well as long term. I could just see all these tensions that exist within it, but that's what's so fascinating about it. And I'm sure you've had this come up in the previous podcast. It's so far reaching, the scope of it is so wide. It's almost the more you get into it, the more you do, the more opportunities you unlock in other parts of the business. Right. So, I suppose what it involves, in a nutshell, this role is a lot of influence and collaboration, and making sure that we can try and integrate sustainability into all the planning that's going on in every part of the business, whether that's from operations, the commercial team, the customer team, the network and strategy team. It's really trying to embed sustainability as early as possible and at every point of thinking across all of that.
And by the way, if I can jump here, the kind of a recognition of this complexity is what gives the name to the podcast, the Chief Sustainability Heroes, because I believe, to transform complex organizations like BA, you truly need to be a hero.
Yeah, and that's what we're touching on the sustainability complexities. That's not even layering in the kind of business complexities, which I'm sure many other sectors experience similar things. But for us as a business, we have, a workforce that has head office function, but essentially we're a mobile operation. We have teams spread out around the world, many of them working shifts. We have real specialist functions in kind of pilots, cabin crew, engineers. We have call center functions. So there's huge variety in the types of people that we need to engage and the types of impacts that we have on sustainability across the business, as well as the opportunities to influence those. So yeah, there's never a dull moment and there's lots to do, but it's that complexity I think is just fascinating and it's actually really motivating.
Cool.
Yeah.
And speaking of that complexity, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing at British Airways or more broadly across the aviation sector? And what are you doing to navigate those challenges in your role and as an organization?
So if I start broadly, kind of beyond just our business and looking at the whole sector, the biggest challenge obviously is decarbonising this industry that I said before, we are reliant on fossil fuels at the moment. The good news at this point in time is that we now have the technology solutions, not just technology, but the chemical, the solutions in many ways to address those. And, going back to my career and how long I've been working in this industry, for a long time, we didn't have the answers. We didn't know what we would need to change. So at least now we know what the solutions are, whether that's sustainable aviation fuel, future low carbon aircraft, such as hydrogen, carbon removals of various types. We know what we need now to get to net zero. But the challenge is the pace of change and the scale of the change that's needed at pace. And the challenges around that are the pace of policy support to help drive that, the kind of trying to match the ambition level that we have with, some of the energy majors or the manufacturers where the timescales for change are often much longer than what we'd like to see from our operation, and just trying to work with our suppliers on that. So those are some of the kind of contextual challenges. For us in the business, I suppose where we're at now, I feel like we're in a fairly mature point in our program. BA has had a long track record of action on sustainability, both in climate and in community, going back 2-3 decades. But we brought this program together and launched under the umbrella of BA Better World in 2021. And since then, we've made a lot of progress in terms of engaging people, building awareness and understanding, and trying to help people understand how they can contribute. I think the point we're at now is really, we've done a lot of the low-hanging fruit. So it's really some of the quite challenging business processes that we've sort of gone round them once. So we've got, staff incentives attached to the reward function, etc. We've done a lot of these things that were quite, leadership at the time back in 2018, 2019. But now we need to go around them again and think, how can we get more traction through using core business processes, financial planning processes, etc., to really embed sustainable thinking right at the start of projects before they get up and going, because it's much easier to have a meaningful impact if you can influence early on in any project. And I think that's where we're at now, is trying to make sure that that can become normal.
And I would like Carrie to ask you to elaborate a little bit on your net zero journey, because of course that is a very hot topic today in many industries. It's a very hot topic in your industry. Yeah. I assume that most of your emissions are linked to the use of fuels. What type of levers are you using and planning to use in the future in order to decarbonize a BA?
Yeah. So you're right. The majority of our emissions, so if you look at our Scope 1 emissions, going to put me on the spot now, but I think, we're kind of 7 to 8% Scope 1 emissions are from flying aircraft.
Yeah, there's no surprise.
1 to 2% is our Scope 2 kind of electricity, and the remaining is kind of upstream, either aircraft manufacture and disposal or production of the fuel that we use. So almost all of it relates to the operation of the fuel, whether it's Scope 3 or Scope 1. For us, the levers that we have available. So if I kind of try and paint a picture here with my words of our pathway to net zero, and we often kind of set it out as a roadmap with a chart of kind of where our emissions are at now. So our gross emissions each year, about 15 million tonnes of CO2 emissions, so very substantial footprint. If you look at the trajectory of if we were to continue to grow in line with kind of government projected demand, those emissions, based on historic performance, would continue to grow with that growth. Obviously, we've set a net zero target. So in 2019, we were part of IAG, the first airline group in the world to commit to net zero, and we quantified our pathway on how we were going to get there at that time. So in order to kind of separate that growth from the emissions, what we need is three main parts to that pathway to net zero. The first one is operations in aircraft. So good practice in our operations, engaging our pilots and making sure that they fly the aircraft that we have now as efficiently as possible is fundamental. We need to kind of treat the fuel like the gold dust it is and minimise as much of that unnecessary emissions as we can. There's the investing in the new aircraft that are currently coming into the fleet, and those typically are between 25 to 35% more efficient than the aircraft they're replacing. So that aircraft renewal pace is really important for us. And still within that first piece of the kind of pathway to net zero is also the investing in future aircraft and trying to create that pool for future technology. I mentioned before about hydrogen, for example. For us and the types of aircraft we fly, it's unlikely that electric or hybrid electric is going to be able to power the types of journeys that we provide in our fleet. So aircraft sizes from like 100 to 180 people, right up to 400 people, for example, in A380. Many of those on medium to long haul operations. So for that, we're looking to the future for hydrogen, and we're investing in hydrogen propulsion through partners such as AeroAvia, who were, again, pioneers in this industry, and supporting work through the Aerospace Technology Institute, again, to drive that innovation and looking to the long-term future. The middle part of our pathway, so that's all section one of kind of trying that kind of operations in aircraft. The next part of our pathway, and that will each one is about a third. So that aircraft and operations is about a third of the emissions reduction to get us to net zero. The next third, we believe, will come from sustainable aviation fuel. And this is first, second, and third generation fuel. So first generation fuel being like used cooking oil, HEFA type fuel. Second generation being like alcohol to jet fuel, ethanol type processes. And then finally, the power to liquids, so captured carbon processed into aviation fuel. I touched on it before, but the great thing is now that we now have all three of those currently kind of feeding in or secured to start in our operation from next year. And we've been operating first generation sustainable fuel for over 3 years now, routinely. So all these aircraft that are taken off here, the aircraft taken off from Heathrow, all of them now have a tiny proportion of sustainable aviation fuel. Currently, about 2% of all our fuel use is SAF, and we're trying to get to 10% by 2030. And then the final piece, by 2050, we will still have residual emissions, even with all the effort going into those first two parts. We will still have residual emissions. So there we will rely on market-based measures, including carbon removals and some element of carbon offsets through CORSIA. But by 2050, we see all of that residual emissions will be carbon removals, and that's how we'll get to net zero. So hopefully that helps.
Excellent. No, this is very interesting and very clear. And I guess looking ahead, probably one of the key challenges with the use of sustainable aviation fuels is availability and cost, right? We really need these new fuels to to reach a scale and economic viability. I guess that's real. It's a real challenge. In terms of carbon removal technologies, how confident are you that they will be, available at the right time when you need them? In a way that is going to be cost effective.
So you've touched on my passion mission on carbon removals. So to answer your question in short, how confident am I that they'll be available? I'm very, very confident.
Good. That's good news for everyone.
Yes.
And I'll tell you why. So basically, carbon removals are available now. And I think probably here, maybe what you were talking about when you inferred in your question there is about kind of direct air capture type carbon removals. But for us, we're really keen to see recognition of all types of carbon removals, nature-based, nature-enhanced, like biochar, like enhanced rock weathering, as well as the technology-based, like direct air capture. And all of those are available now, but they are not currently receiving the investment that's needed to unlock them and bring them to the scale that's needed. And I feel really strongly about this, about how the role that we have to play in BA of helping drive the scale up, the recognition of the opportunity that carbon removals provide, as well as accelerating the pace of development in that sector. So earlier this year, actually almost a year ago to the day, we did a kind of first of a kind debt financing partnership together with a couple of partners. So Undo, who are a little startup enhanced rock weathering project based in the UK, together with Curate, who is like a carbon removals marketplace, and Standard Chartered Bank. And together we tried to show that all elements of the supply chain to mobilise the carbon removals industry are there and lined up. And we tried to demonstrate with that by offering debt financing to small startups like Undo, so Standard Chartered, we put in an offtake purchase. Standard Chartered Bank were able to support the lending to the Undo project to enable the carbon removals to work. And we basically demonstrated that whole supply chain ready to go now. It was a tiny scale demonstrator, but then this year in September, we then launched our next stage in that. And I'm really excited to say it means that BA is now the largest purchaser of carbon removals in the UK and globally the largest airline purchaser of carbon removals. And that was with a portfolio of mixed types of carbon removals, ranging from some direct air capture from market leaders like 1.5 and Climeworks, so small volumes, but demonstrating that technology is coming on stream now, ranging from nature-based, so we had some sequoia, long duration, woodland code carbon removals, and some biochar, and some enhanced rock weathering, river rock weathering. And we're trying to showcase all these different ways of capturing carbon and demonstrating that if you can line up the regulation, buyers like British Airways can be in this market now. And I'll wrap up this soon, but I just want to make one final point on this. We've been talking about kind of this in the context of getting to net zero, but I think when you think about it from the climate perspective, the opportunity to activate the carbon removal market means that the sooner we do it, the better for the planet. So, of course, we want to be minimising emissions. That's a given for the outset for every sector and every organisation. But if we can scale removals as fast as possible, then we can prevent the higher or the worst cases of temperature change and concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. So it's a no-brainer to do it as soon as possible, not to treat carbon removals as a kind of mop-up sponge that need to be deployed in 2050, but that they're essential to be deployed now throughout. And then by 2050, we need them for the hard to abate the still residual emissions. But yeah, so I'm really passionate about that. You probably can tell. But
this is a very interesting, and I guess what I love of this example and perspective is that you really see, the different levels associated to sustainable transformation. Because of course, you have there is what you do at the corporate level, there is what you do at the supply chain level, but very often sustainability, really pushes you to consider new ecosystems that you need to activate and be part of in order to transform your business activities. And this example you gave us is a fantastic example of ecosystem orchestration for the purpose of sustainable transformation. And I agree with you. This type of interventions now can be, critical to avoid the climate tipping points that we face and that we really need to avoid. So very interesting example.
Yeah. It is interesting, and it also shows that there's not one single magic solution to all of this, and that you need multiple solutions at play in parallel. So that's interesting. And on that note, so given you took us through the sort of 3-part roadmap, if you will, to get to net zero, and obviously within that there's many different projects and initiatives that need to come to fruition. So in your view, what are the critical skills that you need, in your role, I guess, to sort of steward this plan forward, and how do you develop and maintain those skills?
I think this is a really hard question. I'm just trying to figure out how to sequence it because there's lots of different elements. I think probably a forward vision. I'd say my head most of the time lives in the future, and I'm always I can see the future very, very clearly. I suppose one of the skills that you need to be able to draw on is to be able to use that kind of vision to outline a strategy that's compelling for the business to follow, and then to bring that from a concept into reality. And that essentially is what Be a Better World is and was. It's kind of come from that vision, but it's fully integrated into the business strategy in a way that it feels part of this organization, that people can own it. So there's no point in it being my vision. It has to be a collective vision. And I think what we've managed to do here is integrate it into, we have 5 corporate priorities. It's set as one of those. We have a kind of business strategy is integral to that in terms of our values and our top priorities. So that visioning is part of it. I think in terms of other skills that are needed to do this, it sort of goes without saying, but the technical founding on kind of understanding, and for me, I think it's incredibly helpful that I've come through multiple organizations, but through sustainability teams as they've grown over the last 3 decades. And I have done a lot of the roles that people now do in my team. So I've done environmental reporting, I've done compliance and audit. I've done kind of carbon disclosure project reporting. And I think having that understanding of the technical elements within those and the requirements helps when you then come to running the plan. But I think there's some other skills like kind of being highly collaborative. I think all the things that we touched on earlier about the variety that comes with this, you probably need to be highly adaptable, highly resilient, because there's many knockbacks, and for every step forward there's maybe some that go backwards as well. And I suppose quite creative, because you have to constantly be looking for ways to navigate day-to-day business pressures, and there's always reasons why something can't happen right now, why there's other business pressures. So to find a way to make sure that you can stay on track or keep making progress. So I'm not sure that was very clear, but just some initial thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think you partially answered our next question, but when you're speaking about vision and priorities that are clearly defined and outlined for a team. So how would you, especially for a company your size, which is quite big, how do you engage employees across an organization and get them behind, your sustainability strategy, and help and invite them to contribute to the goals and target that you're setting out to achieve?
Yeah. So they sorry, somebody was trying to come in here. The joys of office working. So how we engage our team. So I think, firstly, the recognition of how important it is to engage your colleagues. And in BA at the moment, I think we have about almost 40,000 people working in the business. Personally, it's important for these people working in an organisation like BA that has a large carbon footprint, and aviation is quite kind of, comes under the spotlight quite a lot for its sustainability credentials. So I feel like we have an obligation to inform our people about what we're doing about this, and as well as an obligation to inform our customers. And so right from day one, from when we launched BA Better World, engaging our people was one of the key parts of our strategy. And we have a kind of twice a year colleague engagement survey. So we've baselined that and we're tracking throughout. And I'm really delighted to say we have kind of transformed that level of understanding and engagement. Before we launched BA Better World, or the month before we launched it, our baseline was 35% of colleagues kind of understood the sustainability program within the business. To be fair, there wasn't really an umbrella thing. Now we're at almost 70%. And the question that we ask is quite a high bar. It's, do you understand BA Better World and the role that you play in it? And to be now, I think it's like 67% colleagues answering that as positive, then I think that's fantastic. And that's come through a huge programme of work over the last 3 years. So I'll touch on some of the things that we've done. So we've held roadshows, colleague engagement events. I touched on the fact that for the management levels, we have parts of their bonus, 10% of the bonus correlates to our carbon intensity performance. We work really, really closely with the communications team. So our internal communications, we're very lucky to have a lot of quality channels that we can reach our people across the business. And just this year, we launched a brand new sustainability learning programme that we developed in partnership with Futera. And it's already been award-winning. I think it won an award within the first month of it launched. We've already had more than 7,000 colleagues complete that, and we just launched it 2 months ago. And we've designed that to be really interactive, to try and speak to people in language that they're familiar with on a platform that they're familiar with. So we've made sure that it's accessible to colleagues who are flying as flight crew or cabin crew or engineers. And we've tailored it so that there's modules within it, especially designed for call centre people, for cabin crew. So they think, what's relevant to me? And for cabin crew, that's maybe much more about segregating waste, making sure that we can segregate single-use plastic. For engineers, it might be about handling hazardous materials, for example. And for call centre people, it may be being familiar with our products and services so they can explain that to customers, or dealing more with waste or energy efficiency. So it's hugely varied. And I think we've done roadshows, we've done awards events to try and champion the people across the business that have driven change. So one of our great examples, I'll call out his name, Tom Wiggins. So last year, he had a real passion about driving change. He looks after our ground fleet, and he had an idea of bringing HVO fuel in and new electric fleet. And now we've got more than 700 vehicles airside that are operating either on HVO or electric, and they're all branded with BA Better World. Welcome on board our most important journey yet. They're very visual for people to see. It's a great reminder. And we've got some staff buses as well that are operating on electric. So he won one of our major awards. And I think what we want to showcase is that people across the business have got the best ideas, and we can help them bring them to fruition and make them work. So yeah, lots of work going on that, but it's very exciting to see that the enthusiasm that comes through from people and the pride. I think people, when they find out about what's going on, they're really excited to get involved. And so it creates this feedback loop of positive energy. Yeah.
Lots of momentum. That's fantastic.
And I guess this is fantastic to hear, and maybe no surprise that a leading airline is also leading on sustainability. But let me ask you something. I guess the last year has been an interesting one from a sustainability and sustainable development perspective. We have a lot of geopolitical tensions we are dealing with in the world. Recently, COP in Azerbaijan, who I guess ended with results that were not particularly pleasing to many, and it was a controversial COP. So, how confident are you that we are going to be able, to achieve what we need to achieve? And I'm referring to the SDG agenda and the targets associated to that agenda. And how confident are you that actually business will play a key role in delivering those objectives?
You're right. It's been a tough year. I recently attended an event, a UK climate leaders event at the Houses of Parliament, and there was a discussion about this there, and some really nice thoughts that I'll share. I can't remember who said it. I think it was John Elkington or Adair Turner, Lord Adair Turner, who were kind of talking about this and saying, there's a sense that maybe this year is a bit of a ESG recession. We've seen kind of some political entities backtracking from commitments on climate action, for example. Yeah. And how do we respond to that? So I do feel optimistic, however, that business will play a part in this. And I think if I think back to 2008, which, I was around working in sustainability at the time. At that time, there was a lot of momentum and a lot of focus on climate action. And then there was the huge global recession. And I would say that we lost a decade of progress in the intervening years before it came back again, kind of 2016, the COP1, the 1.5 report, etc. And then that mobilised the climate emergency, governments committing to net zero, and we saw businesses then step up. But that, it was a 10-year delay between that momentum and that action due to that global economic recession. I'm hopeful now that this recession is kind of a temporary blip, and I feel like the level of momentum that's going on across the world in every sector, I believe, is so much so that this is not going to be derailed this time. And I'd say one of the places where I get a huge amount of encouragement and belief and positivity from is like New York Climate Week. And we're seeing more climate weeks emerging, like London, San Francisco. These are starting to pop up over the world. When you go there, the scale of action and the number of young people working on sustainability, the number of sectors, the policy is driving, the sophistication of the thinking about how we influence and drive change. And this year at New York Climate Week, there was a lot of presence from like Hollywood filmmakers thinking about how we can normalise discussion about climate change, how we can change public perception to really be more accepting of this. The worrying side was, of course, there was the kind of incumbents also kind of trying to create counter narrative, which is very, very disappointing that we're still having to front that in this time. But I hope that most informed people across society recognise the need for change. I think the challenge we've got now is, unfortunately, some of the kind of popular press and media continue to perpetuate the sense that nobody should have to pay a penny for this transition. And I wish it could be a more sophisticated narrative, which is about we might have to pay a little bit more in some areas in the short term, but in the medium to long term, this is going to be actually a much nicer planet to live in, cheaper planet to live in as well, using renewable energy, etc., and a much better future for everyone. So I think we'll get there.
And that's, I guess, a very nice vision that we could end here, I guess, today's episode. But I have one more question for you, Carrie. and the question is this one. We know that this podcast show is followed by young people, sustainability practitioners, graduates from uni who are considering, for example, a career in sustainability and are very passionate about this topic. What is your advice to them? What is your advice to people who are entering careers in this space or are already, for example, part of sustainability teams in organizations and are considering what to do next?
So I tell you, well done. If you're already in this sector, well done. We need you. Keep on here. The good news is there's more opportunities in this sector than ever before. I mean, this is a sector now. Previously, it wasn't. I can't think of an organisation or a sector that doesn't have a part to play in this. And almost every function within any sector also has a part to play in it. I touched on it, whether it's customer, marketing, operations, finance, whatever floats your boat, you can probably find an angle that you can do that with sustainability. So yeah, lots of opportunities. I would say go for it, keep driving your passion. I think one of the things you need to prepare for is knockbacks, challenges, but what I find encouraging with young people now is they are very articulate and I think bolder and braver than probably I was at that age. And that's good and that's to be welcomed. And what we see in BA is a lot of our new entrants, especially our graduates and apprentices, are asking to work in sustainability. And actually sustainability is the most popular function that's been recorded through our apprenticeships, to the point that we're now looking to establish, we have some apprentices that come and work with us for like a 3-month placement, and we're now just about to establish a full 3-year kind of apprenticeship program within BA to work across our full BA Better World.
Nice.
So I think, it's really great. And for people who are more established in their career, I'd also say, if you've got an interest, you probably do if you're listening to this podcast, then again, you may not have to change career. You can probably find a channel to influence through your work that you're doing now. And in many ways, sometimes that's more powerful than moving into a role, because we need change everywhere. So everyone join this. We need your help. And
just like your fleet manager. That's great.
Excellent. Carrie, it was really a pleasure to have you as a guest in our show. Congratulations for the good work you are doing at British Airways, and we wish you a good Christmas.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've got the Christmas text up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great luck. Great luck with the next series. It's been fabulous. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this discussion, we invite you to like and share this episode on your social media. Enjoy the rest of your day.